Welcome to Knowledgeable Aging. I'm your host, Jason Kotar. Joining us today to talk about 9 must-have strategies for living well while living longer is Dr. Joseph Casciani. Dr. Casciani has a 40-year history in aging as a psychologist and manager of mental health practices. He is the author of 2 books, Handbook of Health and Behavior and Living Longer is the New Normal. His website, Living to 100 Club, offers a collection of strategies and resources on successful aging, and his weekly podcast on aging and longevity continues in this tradition with guests who share their professional insights and individuals with personal stories about overcoming their own obstacles. How are you doing today, Dr. Casciani?
I'm doing great, Jason. Thanks very much for this invitation.
Absolutely, thank you. I'm looking forward to our conversation, but before we get started, for those that are joining us for the live webinar, if you have any questions, type the questions in to the chat box on the right-hand side. Time permitting, we will do everything in our power to get your questions answered. And at the end, Dr. Casciani will give his contact information. So, Dr. Casciani, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great. Thanks very much again. And good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I'm here on the West Coast, so it's still morning. Glad to have you all part of this presentation. I'm going to be talking about my strategies for living well while living longer. I'm sure most of you have heard all the ingredients for longevity. We hear all the time about the importance of diet and fitness and social contacts, family, and many others. We know a lot about the odds of living longer and healthier, but what happens when we have a setback? We know it's not a smooth road for everyone, and we all hit potholes now and then. And I want to share some of my insights and strategies to help manage those setbacks that come along with our advancing years. And maybe we can look forward to getting older no matter what gets in the way. And when we're finished, I hope you'll have a fresh new mindset about our senior years. There's so many opportunities to enjoy. So just quickly, my background, as Jason mentioned, I'm a psychologist, technically what's called a geropsychologist. I've worked with nursing homes my whole career. Most of that was really as an administrator, helping to develop programs and contracts and training programs for psychologists and for nursing home staff. And along the way, I learned a lot of things, of course, but I want to share 3 things that I learned that really stand out and still affect me today. First, I saw that people who are referred for mental health services, often had different reactions to how, what happened to them, their medical decline, their, maybe a hip fracture or a stroke. And I always wonder what differentiates the person that can adapt to that fall and hip fracture and rehab, and the other person that says, no, I can't handle this anymore. I'm just done. I can't get involved with my physical therapy. It's not going to work for me. So I always wonder, what is that? What's causing that person to think one way versus the other? The second is that our bodies don't always cooperate with what's going on in our heads. We always have the me in there, the I in there, and we understand that the body is, although we're all connected, what happens to our body doesn't affect our worth, our value as a person. So, unless dementia comes into the picture, and then it's a different conversation. But we always have the me in there to keep that positive outlook, to stay motivated, even when the body is not cooperating. The third point I want to share with you quickly is that we always have this reserve of motivation and determination. Sometimes we call it resilience or grit or fire, whatever we want to call it. It's always there. And in my mind, it never goes away. It might get blocked. It might get covered up. We might think we're all out of it. But in fact, as long as we're alive, we still have that motivation and fire inside of us. So to me, that's what I want to share with my clients and people who are visiting my Living to 100 Club, to share these insights with you. So let me move on to our first slide here. Here's what I'm going to be covering today. We're at a shorter amount of time, so this will be a little bit abbreviated. But first, I'm going to be talking about the lessons that we've learned from Centenarians. Age is only a number, thinking styles, starting new chapters, and overcoming setbacks and depression. This picture, by the way, is a gentleman by the name of Alexander Soba. In 19, when he was 71 years old, he's done 3 transatlantic crossings, and he did his third in a solo, specially equipped kayak. He did his third at age 71. So he's done 3 of these, and he's made it every time. So let's think about what's possible. We hear these stories all the time of fantastic feats, and Alexander Soba is one of them. And he always talked about suffering, and he relabels suffering as determination and motivation. He's kind of what he called himself, a contrarian. And if you're not willing to suffer, he said, you can do nothing. You can sit and die. I don't want to die in my sleep. Now, I'm not recommending to my audiences that we kayak across the ocean, but let's think about taking on new challenges and new opportunities. Some of you may have heard about the blue zones. First of all, let me touch on a bit of research that the National Institute of Health published a few years ago. They said that genes or genetics account for only 25 to 30% of our longevity, 25 to 30% of a long life. The other 70% is due to lifestyle factors. And we have to keep that in mind when we talk about living to 100 or living longer. So what are the lifestyle factors of the people who live the longest around the world? Well, some researchers, Dan Buettner and Nick Buettner and his team, studied demographics, people living into their, over 100. And they discovered 5 regions around the world where people are living longer. And these are the centenarians. So the centenarians are living in these 5 regions. First of all, one is in the Greek island of Ikaria. That's the picture you see here. Okinawa, Japan. There's a region in Sardinia off the coast of Italy. Loma Linda here in Southern California, and a portion of Costa Rica called the Nicoya Peninsula. So these are the blue zones, and I think they're working on identifying some others around the world, but these are the blue zones so far. And let me share with you what are the common traits or characteristics of the centenarians. First of all, they're physical, very physically active. They move their bodies a lot. And this is not running marathons and going to the gym. This is just doing everyday activities, maybe a lot of gardening, walking to town, up and down steps, moving naturally and moving often, but being very physical. Second, there is some alcohol use, but in moderation, maximum of 1 to 2 drinks a day. Number 3, they're engaged socially. There's a lot of good social connections, healthy social circle and network. And this may include the religious beliefs and affiliation with their church or spiritual beliefs, but there's a sense of belonging to some community. Number 4, there's a sense of purpose and meaning. I think this is one of the most important. That means people have something to connect to, something to look forward to. They wake up in the morning and they think about what's in store for them during the day. So this is some passion or a hobby. It's also stress reducing, but the importance of having something to draw us and help us to stay connected with a sense of meaning and purpose in our lives. Number 5, commitment to families and friends, especially those who support healthy lifestyles. Number 6 is diet. We all hear about the diet, and the plant-based diets are very common in the blue zones. That means a lot of reliance on vegetables, including beans and legumes, whole grains, nuts, squash, honey, wild greens, brown rice. And there's some meat in their diets, but very limited portions, maybe 3 to 4 ounces at a time, and no more than 5 times a month. A little bit different from what we see in the newspaper ads and the TV ads for processed food. So the sense of diets and healthy nutrition, that's really key to the longevity of these centenarians. And the last one is enough sleep, at least 7 hours a night, and napping occasionally during the day. But these are, again, the characteristics that are common among these 5 blue zones. Let me shift to the next strategy. How we explain events to ourselves has a huge impact on how well we cope with them. How we interpret an event that comes along in our life really colors the way we're going to manage or live with that event. This is a picture of Epictetus. Epictetus was a Roman slave who was eventually freed by his master, and he went on to be one of the founders of the school of Stoicism. And as you can imagine, he had a lot to say about how we, react to events. And his famous line is, "We are disturbed not by events, but by the views we take of these events." Think about that. We can't control what happens, but we can control how we respond to them. And I just want to talk about 2 thinking styles. Number 1, positive or negative thinking. The best example is the oldest one. Is the glass half full or half empty? And I say an 8-ounce glass with 4 ounces of water is both half full and half empty. So you decide. How do we look at an event? Do we see it as something positive or do we see it as something negative? I like to do an exercise when I'm with live audiences, and I break the room into 2 halves, and I say, okay, everybody on the right, I want you to look around the room and find everything that's wrong with the room. Maybe marks on the walls, stains on the carpet, maybe the curtains aren't right or the fixtures are broken. Look around and see what you see that's wrong. And then the other half of the room, I like to say, all right, I want you to look around and find everything that's nice about the room. Maybe the way the sun's coming in, or the plants are healthy, or chairs or new furniture or fixtures. And then we regroup, and I go back and forth, and I ask him. And the point is, as you can imagine, the point is it's the same room, right? What are we looking for? If you're looking for what's wrong, you'll find it. If you're looking for what's right, you'll find that also. The second thinking style is, excuse me a second, understanding what we can control in our life. There are many things we can control, and there are many things we cannot control. Let me show you our next slide here that points out. We have no say over the weather, the stock market, taxes, a lot of things that are going on without our input. We can have some input in voting and all that, but there are many things that we have no control over. And this is a collection of things that we do have some control over. Our beliefs, our values, how I interpret events, how I judge other people, what types of foods are in my diet, how often I exercise. How kind am I to others? I've highlighted the one on the left-hand side, the 4th row. It says how often I ruminate on the past. Yeah, there are people, just to take a second, there are people that spend a lot of time dwelling on the past and maybe fretting over what happened, maybe poor decisions or problems. And, we have no way of changing what we did in the past. Maybe we said the wrong thing to somebody, or we acted improperly, or we regret getting angry. We can't change that, right? But we can change how we perceive that event. We can change how we explain that event to ourselves. And that's really important. So understanding that, we can't change what we did in the past, but we can maybe change our perception of it and really give ourselves credit. Maybe at the time, that was all we could do. Maybe at the time, that was all we had resources for. Maybe at the time, it was an impulsive act, and it was the best thing at the time. But today, looking back, we might do something different. But again, let's remember, we can't change it, but we can change our perception of it. So again, to me, one of the keys to longevity is being able to discern the difference between what I can control and what I cannot control. So let's pick our battles, go after what we can shape and influence. I also like to talk about starting a new chapter. It's helpful to look back on our lives and see a series of chapters unfolding, maybe things that, milestones that mark our journey, like our graduation or marriage, birth of children, promotions, retirement, maybe death of a spouse, maybe someone getting sick, maybe a husband developing Alzheimer's. These are chapters, these are events in our lives. And we have to look at starting new chapters, whether intended or not, whether pleasant or not, whether liberating or not. Sometimes we have to downsize. We have to give up our favorite possessions or maybe our furniture and move into a smaller home. Maybe there's a divorce in our life. Maybe giving up the car keys and no longer having access to, that independence that driving brings. Maybe the death of a spouse. How do I go on after losing a spouse of 40 or 50 years? The future is too dark. I can't imagine living the rest of my life alone. Well, yeah, I'm not minimizing this, believe me, but we need to go through that grief. We need to mourn the loss and work through it, and then look at what's next. We have to be able to say, okay, what do I have in my horizon now? What's my future like in this new chapter? Okay, so we redefine ourselves. We're no longer happily married. Now we're a widow or widower. So we create a new definition of ourselves, and we learn to stay positive in the face of these changes, even in the face of these losses. So let's say a husband comes down with Alzheimer's disease. Again, this is my new role. I'm writing a new script for myself. I'm now responsible for taking care of my husband. He has a debilitating dementia and he needs my care. And this is my new chapter. This is my new chapter. And it's helpful to describe it that way to ourselves because it helps us to kind of create that new character that we didn't envision for ourselves, but now we have the way to write a new script. It's our script. We can write whatever we want. I've talked with a couple of actors who've been on my podcasts, and they've, when they describe, their roles, they get the scripts and they take on a new character. And I asked them both about how do they do that. And of course, there's a lot involved in the method acting, of course, but understanding that need to let go of yesterday. Don't let what I did yesterday or last year define who I am today. That's really crucial. And a good actor, and not just actors, of course, but anybody facing these changes, these new chapters, has to understand I don't have to define myself today based on what I did yesterday or what I did last year. And that means, at the same time, maybe starting a new career, maybe learning some new skills or new talents, or learning a new language, learning to play a musical instrument. I bought myself a set of electronic drums a few months ago. I've never played the drums. I never played any musical instrument, and I'm learning because I want to learn and I want to open some new doors and see what opportunities that brings. And so far I'm really thoroughly enjoying it. So the notion is let's be ready to open new doors and see what opportunities are out there. I also like to talk about managing setbacks. To me, Living to 100 Club is for people that are on their journey and wanting to live longer, but how do we get over those setbacks? This is a picture of Roderick Sewell. Roderick was the first double amputee to complete the Ironman triathlon a couple of years ago. That's a 2.5-mile swim, a 112-mile bike race, and he was kneeling on a hand cycle, and a 26-mile marathon running, and he was wearing prostheses on both of his legs. Rod was born without tibias, the larger bone in both of his legs, and he had legs amputated as a child. So he became involved with the Challenge Athletes Foundation, and now he has his own fitness studio. So I have to ask, how many of us could have persevered like Roderick did? I recall a patient at a nursing home. He was referred after he had his leg amputated, really struggling with that, of course. And we'll call him Ralph. Ralph was a boxer. He was a professional boxer his whole career. So he was having a lot of difficulty seeing himself without a leg. How could I, as a professional boxer, envision myself now incomplete? Part of my body is gone. Well, unfortunately, Ralph had to have his second leg amputated a couple of months later. And of course, this was a double whammy. How could he view himself as a person of any worth or value now having lost both of his legs, and he was being fitted with two prosthetic legs? So my role was to help Ralph understand, look, we're separate from our body. Our worth and value has nothing to do with what happens to our body. It declines, it deteriorates. Maybe we have a stroke, we have amputations, but our value remains intrinsic. There's nothing to diminish our sense of worth as a person. So I never thought I could take 10 steps after my stroke, but I did. I never thought I could finish writing that chapter. It was the hardest one yet. I never thought I could make that phone call to my daughter after not talking to her for so many months. I never thought I could give up my car keys. Driving was always my lifeline. So we dig deep and we find what kind of strength and fire and grit that'll help us over these setbacks. Having the stroke, losing our legs to an amputation, double amputation, maybe being confined to a wheelchair or needing a walker. These are all setbacks, but it doesn't mean we can't push beyond them and get beyond them. I always like to talk with my patients when I was working in nursing homes about being the captain of your ship. And yeah, your ship is your body, and you're steering that ship whenever you can. And there was one patient who had a terrible stroke, and she was bedridden for almost a year. And eventually, physical therapists were able to get her up and get her on her feet. And I would always talk to her, Captain, how's your day? How was your week? And one week I came into the facility, and I said, Captain, how was your week? She said, well, the ship ran aground. Well, I said, what happened? She said, I was walking with my therapist holding onto my wheelchair, and I just collapsed. So I, got up and, turned the ship around. So that's the spirit I'm talking about, managing those setbacks with that willpower, that positive outlook, and pushing forward. I also like to talk about depression, because depression is not uncommon in our senior years. Now, depression affects us in many ways, as many of you know. It affects our mood, our outlook, our sleep, our appetite. One thing that depression does very well is it narrows our perspective. When we're feeling depressed, all we can see is what's straight ahead of us, meaning maybe a series of disappointments or losses or disappointments, whatever's going on. All we can see is what's wrong, and we get pulled into that. It's like a vacuum sometimes, and that's another conversation. But my point is, all we see is this series of problems and things that are wrong. And my thing is, let's look at the whole picture. We make these extreme statements. All my friends are dying off. My health is going down the tubes. I can't seem to walk at all anymore. So let's take off the blinders. It's almost like the depression is a filter that only lets in the bad and the negative. Let's take that filter off. Let's take those blinders off. Horses are fitted with blinkers so they're not distracted by what's going on around them. And depression is the same thing, only our blinkers cause us to miss what's going on in the whole picture. We want to look at more than what's straight in front of us with those disappointments. Let's see the positives. Let's look at the good things that are going around. Just like the room that I talked about. Are we looking at the negatives, or can we see the positives? Well, let's look at the whole picture. It's like seeing dark clouds when we're depressed. All we see is a gray sky. Well, there's always a blue sky above it. So let's let some of the blue sky poke through, and let's let some of the blue sky help us see that there are good along with some of the bads. So Sorry, jumped ahead. Yeah, we could talk for hours about successful aging and all the important steps that science has taught us about, diet and fitness and other strategies. Well, what's important is how does this information today that I'm sharing apply to you in your own situation? We know it's not a smooth road ahead, but we can always feel uplifted about our future. I just want to take a minute to talk about my website, the Living to 100 Club. There's a lot of resources there to help people on their journey, to help people, feel part of a community, those who are embracing the beauty of, the reality that we're living longer and better than any generation. Our club is all about living longer, healthier, and happier lives. Like our tagline says, we're turning aging on its head. So visit the website. I'll give you more details at the close of my presentation. You'll see a lot of podcast conversations, a lot of resources for, public speaking and coaching. And be sure to sign up to be on our mailing list. Free sign up. You'll get a copy of my 9 tips for living well while living longer, a lot of what I'm talking about today. Again, it's a PDF, it's a free download, so go to the website and sign up to be on our list. So, when I opened today, I asked you to imagine how you'd feel with some new perspectives on aging and new ways to manage the obstacles on our path. So congratulations to being so attentive to my presentation. Now you have to take this information and put it into action. We touched on some important subjects. I think overcoming setbacks. Remember Rodney Sewell, the first double amputee to complete the Ironman triathlon. We talked about the Centenarians and their characteristics of those living longer. Starting new chapters, redefining ourselves, and we talked about thinking patterns, positive or negative, what can I control and what's out of my control, how am I interpreting events. Let's remember these are the best years of our lives. We have the maturity, the wisdom, the compassion, the independence to stay positive about our senior years, to celebrate aging, and to embrace the notion of getting older. But like I've said several times, it's not always a smooth road. There are hurdles and obstacles. So from my perspective, to age successfully means to cope with whatever struggle comes our way. That can mean living to 100, hopefully. If that's not in the cards, we want to stay positive along the way. We take control of our future, commit to moving forward no matter how many bumps we encounter. Even with losses of loved ones, we look forward. Even with secure retirement and good health, we look forward. Even with bones that break, bodies that don't cooperate, we still look forward. Our beauty is in our spirit, our attitude, and our outlook. The best part about this is that this determination, this fire, is ours to keep forever. No one can take it away from us. Not our spouse, not our adult children, not our friends, our neighbors, not our doctors. This is ours to keep forever. This fire, this determination, being the captain of your ship. Okay, we have a few minutes to open up for any questions that our audience has. Jason, do you have any questions?
We do. Thank you, Dr. Casciani. First question, why geropsychology? Did you think of it as a calling? Why did you get into that?
Yeah, my first position after I got licensed here in California as a psychologist, I took a position with county mental health on an inpatient geropsychiatric unit, so inpatient psych unit for seniors. And I was there only a couple of years, but I learned so much about the impact that psychologists can have on helping the individual who is, hospitalized, really struggling with, physical loss, mental decline, all of that. And then shortly after that, I applied and was awarded a contract with the Department of Aging. This was back in the early 80s. I'm dating myself. But another colleague and myself wrote a training manual for the Department of Aging on mental health topics that was implemented in all the state's nursing homes. So we did that, we wrote the manual, and then we brought it around to train the trainers in these facilities on all these mental health topics. That was a wonderful experience. And then Medicare came along and changed the reimbursement for psychologists. For the first time, we could get paid for doing mental health services with seniors, Medicare beneficiaries. And after that, it was starting this mental health group. We had contracts in nursing homes around the country in 8 states and several hundred psychologists. So it's just a natural progression for me. And I really, initially, I just found that the role of a psychologist is tremendous because, you know, there's always the medical care and the medication and all of that. But the role of the psychologist to really help the person come to grip with, you know, what's going on and cope with those changes and, you know, maybe reverse them and maybe not. We can't always reverse them, but let's learn to live with them in a positive way. So that's been my career. Yeah.
Very good. Very good. Another question. If I see my mother beginning to give up, what suggestions do you have for me to encourage her?
Yeah, well, first of all, let's not try to change her mind. You know, we might not agree with it, but let's try to understand Mom. Let's have her explain why she's feeling that way, because that, you know, we can't tell somebody how to feel or, you know, how to look at the world or how to, you know, judge their experiences. So let's listen first of all, and then secondly, let's point out maybe some of the things that are missing. Let's point out some of those strengths that she still has. I call them residual strengths. We might be declining in many areas, maybe just our mood or maybe physically, but we always have some strengths that are still there. And let's build on those strengths. You know, maybe it's our, you know, attention to hygiene and, you know, the way we dress, or maybe it's our sense of humor, or, you know, maybe conversations we have about politics. But let's recognize the positives and not allow Mom to just solely focus on, you know, what's wrong. Let's help her take those blinkers off and see some of the good things too.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah. Well, Dr. Casciani, how can people find you?
Yeah, again, my website is www.livingto100.club, not .com or not .org, but .club, livingto100.club. You can go there and sign up for my email list, and you'll get a announcement every week about the latest podcast, and every month you'll get a copy of my newsletter, and you can also download the 9 tips that I referenced earlier. There's also a new school that I've developed, an online school, and in a couple of weeks it'll have my full presentation there online. Right now there's a few courses, and if you go to, here's the website, ideas-worth-sharing.livingto100.club. ideas-worth-sharing.livingto100.club. It's a mouthful, I know, but anyway, you'll find a collection there of my online courses. My phone number, 858-272-3992. That's my office number. Again, 858-272-3992. And my email address, JC, my initials, JC @livingto100.club. LIVING, the number 100, 100.club. So again, I do podcasts, I do public speaking, resilience coaching, also clinical training, consulting for organizations that need some help with, you know, maybe training their staff on dementia or depression. So I'm available.
Okay. Really informative website you have too. So I'd encourage anybody to go to www.livingto100.club. Thank you again, Dr. Casciani. As far as knowledgeable aging, I'm sorry.
Just quickly, sorry, I omitted my book. Living Longer is the New Normal. You see a picture of it on the slide here. It's available on Amazon. It's a quick read, 100 pages. And again, it captures so much of what I'm talking about today. So feel free to pick up a copy.
Will do. As far as knowledgeable aging, you can go to our website, knowledgeableaging.com, see all of our upcoming and archive webinars. I encourage you to go to YouTube. Find us on Knowledgeable Aging and subscribe. We update that a couple times per month. If podcasts are your things, you can find us on Apple, Spotify, etc. Till next time, I'm your host, Jason Kotar. This is Knowledgeable Aging.